Let's look at the second method that our textbook shows for solving quadratic equations. This is called the graphical method. Now this did not exist when I was a young whippersnapper taking algebra courses, because back in that day graphical or graphing computers or graphing calculators did not exist. Now they're available and they're affordable, so it's a whole new way to attack the problem. Suppose you were asked to solve this equation, 0 equals 3x squared minus x minus 10. If you put the associated function into your calculator, you would get a graph that looks like this. Now we know that the y-intercepts of a parabola are the roots of the associated equation. In other words, this parabola appears to be going exactly through positive 2 on the x-axis. So it looks like 2 is an x value that makes y 0. That is, gives us the 0 over here. So let's plug 2 into the original equation and see what we get. So I put 2 in here in place of x, calculate on the left side, sure enough 12 minus 12, 0. It checks out. So I know that 0 is one of my roots to this equation. I'm halfway home. I have to find the other one. Well, if I look over here at the x-intercept, it's not landing neatly on a negative 1 or a negative 2 or anything like that. It seems to be between negative 1 and negative 2, closer to negative 2. So, you know, I could zoom in and scout around and so forth and find out pretty close to where it's at, but that would just be an approximation. That wouldn't be the exact answer. What you have to do is use a little bit of algebraic theory that we've talked about and solve your problem like this. Let me go ahead and erase this just for a moment. Since we have figured out that 2 is a root of this equation, it must be true then that this factors, and you factor out a binomial factor of x minus 2, right? The only way 2 can work in this quadratic equation is if x minus 2 is a factor, because when you put 2 in a place of x, that gives you the 0, that gives you the solution that we found here. So what does the other factor have to be? We're going to get a binomial. We'll get an x term plus or minus some constant term. Well, whatever that x term is, when the x term here multiplies the x, it has to give us that 3x squared. So it must be 3x, right? Because 3x times x gives me 3x squared. What about the constant term? Whatever number goes here has to multiply this minus 2 and give me a minus 10. So it must be a positive 5. So you see that even when you're using your graphing calculator, you're still forced to do some factoring. Okay, you can't get away from that. Now, to finish solving the problem, I set this factor equal to 0. 3x plus 5 equals 0. I solve, I get x equals minus 5/3. If you want to check that, plug it in. Instead of having the 2's in here that we put in, now put in minus 5/3. You'll get some sloppy calculations that involve fractions, but it will work out. It will solve the equation.